The world is covered with COVID-19. COVID-19 has led many jobs to change into contactless and remote forms. People in TV are struggling to figure out how to adjust themselves efficiently during pandemic.
I saw it as a really good opportunity personally to get my education something and do it in film, something that I always wanted to do. So that's why I decided to go into the RTBN program during the pandemic, because I thought it was a good use of my time and to get my degree during tough times for everybody, so that when I would come out, I would hopefully have a job for my lifetime.
I feel like with any course really, before you go in, you need to have a practical and theoretical sense of what you're doing. And because RTBN is so hands-on and it's like a lot of live things, it's like television, that's what a lot of us are in it for. I feel like it's good to have a really good understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it before you actually, plunge feet first into doing it. So I feel like that's a really good advantage. You get the theoretical and like the lessons before you actually go out and do it. One of the difficulty for that is putting into practice what you learn. That's probably one that it's very, I think, to a lot of extent, very useful.
I think that both are quite beneficial. Again, if we're not needed in a classroom for a lecture, I think it's very convenient to just have it purely online. And I kind of wonder actually what things will be like coming out of the pandemic, if video classes and video interviews will be more common. So I think there is that advantage to having still things being online, but there is of course the advantage of being in the actual control room, using our hands and learning things through muscle memory and through trial and error. And so there's obviously the advantage of both being in person and online too.
Definitely with the pandemic, I feel like people have been more trepidatious on things like interviews. But obviously people are still very cautious and actually more reluctant, I'd say, to participate in what you have. But I feel like on the other hand, people are also wanting to share their voice now more than ever, just in a safer manner now.
A lot of the broadcast news assignments require us to find and do interviews, and we do one that's called Street Talk, where we have to go and talk to people on the street and get their opinions on a specific topic. That was honestly pretty difficult just because of the pandemic. A lot of people are hesitant, but a lot of us have been fortunate enough that, like I said with that previous example of learning how to use OBS and other screen recording programs, that we've been able to do our interviews online with minimal difficulties.
The biggest change in broadcast news since the start of the pandemic is just the ability to connect with more people further away much more fast. We've used things like Skype and Zoom and FaceTime and WhatsApp and Dropbox and all these virtual digital cloud platforms in order to share content with one another, whether that's a source giving us more information or images that we could use for our stories, for our coverage. That has never before been like that. So the biggest change is literally just having all this video content. If this pandemic happened even 10 years ago, but certainly 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been possible. Yes, with broadcast news having to adjust and roll with the punches with the pandemic, I think that we will certainly see some of that stick around. There have been lots of lessons learned about how to share content and how to get good video and images from people quite far away, but it's still relevant to our audience as quickly as possible. Also doing some of those remote interviews when time constraints are there to be able to do good quality video calls. That will stick around, but definitely there will be an appetite for broadcast news journalists like myself to get on the ground, to meet people in person, to be on location for what's happening, when it's happening, as it's happening. And I think that we will see a bit more of a mixed approach going ahead.
Workflow has definitely changed a lot. Before we do a lot more in-person camera interviews, on-camera interviews, and now I guess the reporter has to rely more on Zoom and Skype interviews, and that's just a matter of comfort between us and the person we're interviewing. So my workflow is lessened a little bit in terms of getting on-camera voices, and in terms of collecting B-roll and such, we have to go to cover schools, hospitals, and some people don't want us there, so that's tough as well, right? So we have to do balanced coverage, and sometimes we run into some issues, right? So originally, pre-pandemic, my job was to go to our station every day and pick up a live microwave truck, and so my background skill is in the microwave truck. Because of COVID, I'm not allowed back to work unless it's necessary, so I need a manager's approval to go in and out of the building, and I can only normally go in for only 5 minutes at a time when I have to be back. So I guess in terms of doing my job normally, I find this is a lot easier to do because I now have a vehicle assigned to me with my gear, and I go home at the end of my day, and I leave from my home in the morning, and I meet Stephanie, and we go and get our assignment. And actually, I think the workflow works out a lot better, and I feel like management, they did a very good job in terms of getting us out in the field quicker.